Hey, Andrew, how are you? Go ahead on unmute. It's automatic. I bring you in with a mute. And so
Hello.
you have to unmute yourself.
Everybody good?
I can do it too, probably. Go.
You doing well, Rabbi?
Hello.
There we go.
Hello.
Let me unmute everybody. Hi, all.
Hi.
Hello. Hello.
I don't hear anybody.
Hi, Adrian. Turn your sound.
Hi.
Is my
Thank
volume
you.
down?
How are you, Devorah?
Hello?
Jay here.
There you go. Oh, I know why. There we
Details.
go. Let me put this. I'm going to put this back on. All right. Now I can hear everybody. It's like, whoa, what's going on? Volume's up. Now it's too high.
Well, at least you don't look like a potato.
There you go.
Have you seen the headlines about the supervisor who was doing a call with her employees and she turned herself into a potato and couldn't change it back?
Oh my God. How funny.
Oh,
How funny is that? That's wild.
Yeah.
I'm glad I don't know how to do that stuff.
Right. I'm very glad to see all of you. Hello. Jay, thanks for doing all the
Yeah, thank you, Jay.
connecting and keeping us all in the right direction. I would like to, for the sake of everybody's sanity, come up with some kind of routine schedule. You know, if we want to try and do this twice a month and essentially rotate weeks, you know, we can do that sort of thing. But I'd like us to leave with some level of understanding as to how you'd like to operate.
Jay sent out was good.
Yeah. So just sort of decide, and I'll make sure that I can be there. It's
I hope we're going to do 1 o'clock because I'm tutoring students from 11 to 45.
Hi. No, 1 o'clock is fine. You can anticipate us visiting for about an hour and a half. And all right, who is our 205 number? Welcome. Yeah, who called in on the 205 number?
I did. I'm Adele Barris.
Hi, Del. It's ADLEA. Oh, so there you are.
Here I am. When I tried the other night, I didn't know how to do it.
Well, here you are. So I'm going to put your, wait, let me get everybody in here.
Thank you.
All righty. So I can put your name in here. ADELE.
ADELE, and my last name is Barris, BARAS.
BARAS. There we go.
Thank you.
Sure. Hi, Jean. Nice to see you.
Jean.
All right. Very good. So just some housekeeping matters. Does everybody have, hello, Cantor Friedman. Does everybody have the texts available to you from the website?
I do.
Rabbit.
I mean, I have them for for our meeting. I'm able to, with a shared screen, put those texts, all of them, up on the screen. So you don't have to have them, but it may be useful if you want to look on with those texts.
I don't.
That's fine, Adele. I'm going to share them in a moment when relevant, and you can just see them on the screen.
Wonderful.
The challenge will be if you decide to call in. The other thing we're going to try to do today, if it works, is set up breakout rooms. Breakout rooms are opportunities. I've set them up. I'll set you up in the breakout rooms, and you have a chance to visit with another classmate, chavruta mate, and discuss a particular text that I assign you, okay? So I'm going to try and break you up into those groups.
Can I opt out of that part?
I guess so. Sure.
Because I
No
don't feel comfortable discussing things that I read and puzzle me.
Okay. So we can not do breakout rooms if we want to try and just give people the chance to learn, more privately and silently. That's okay. So maybe we'll work towards, I don't know how to include, I don't know how to do it in a not all or nothing way. So we'll find
I
a way.
don't think
I
you
prefer
can.
an even number so I could be the odd one out.
Yeah, I'm not prepared to sort that out in the middle of class. So I'll have to think about it for the next time. It's fine. It's fine. Not sure how we're going to do this, but that's okay. We'll go to plan B, no problem. So let's get right to the shared screen here. So no, that's not what I want. Oh, I know what I need to do. Hang on. Let's take that down for now. All right. Do you see on your shared screen something that says religion and peoplehood 2?
Yes.
Is that what you
Yes.
Okay.
We doing 2? I thought we were on 3.
We are, we didn't finish 2.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember this at the end of class. I said that we would pick up at 2 because we barely looked at any of the text. One text, Genesis 12. All right. And I said, let's jump back into some of these other texts. So for this next 30 minutes or so, I'd like us to look at one text together, a Passover text, in light of the fact that Passover is coming. Did you know? And we're going to look at that text, and then we'll look at some of the other texts here in lesson 2 that reflect, one, the centrality of Jewish peoplehood and what that means. It's very important for us to have some working definitions of what that means, particularly in light of what our texts have to say about that centrality. And secondly, we'd like to learn more about what the experience and significance our people have within this central sensibility that binds us. Well, what is it like to be part of a people? Why is it important to be part of people? All right, so we're going to look at some texts that kind of reflect the nature of the centrality, and we'll draw out some meaning. And we'll also look at the importance. All right, I need a volunteer because I can't do this myself. Can somebody find their chat box? For this to work well, we're going to have to, actually, you can put your own answers in. Everybody find your chat box.
Where is it?
You're going to go
At the bottom.
at the bottom, could be at the top, could be at the side. You have to find it.
Oh, here it is.
All right, where it says chat,
Yeah.
you want to go in and be able to put down answers.
Okay.
Because while I have the screen up, I cannot see everybody's hand being raised. So you might have to try and call out. Do you have a question? Say, Rabbi, I have a question. All right. Does everybody see that I put something in the chat box?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay. Can you see what I wrote?
Hello.
Shalom.
yes, thank you.
All right. Good. Excellent. All right. So I want to see some more messages in the chat box, and I know that everybody is good. That way I know we'll be able to communicate. That's even better. Oh, I see. I can see 6 people if I do it this way. All right. So far, so good. I haven't seen everybody. Okay. All right. Let's see. What about you, Adele? Are you there? Can you type us a message?
I'm here, but I can't seem to send a message.
All right. I'm glad that you're here. That's all that matters.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, Rabbi.
Just shout out a question if you have one, okay?
Just to remind you that I'm new in town, and when we met, Rabbi Scott Hausman Weiss.
My good pal. He's my good pal. Good man.
Yes.
All right. Adrian, have you found your...
Yes. Here.
Type me a message if you could.
Let's see. Let's see. And then what do I?
Just click.
You don't see that?
Not yet. You just type and hit your send or return.
Send.
All
Let's
right.
see where it says send.
All right. There you go. Fantastic. Well done. All righty. So, okay. Let's take a look at this text from the Haggadah about the 4 children. And what we're going to see in this is some evidence about the centrality of Jewish peoplehood. Adele, you found it.
I finally did.
Very good. Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect. Want everybody to come along. All right. So let's see. Andrew, will you read this piece from the Haggadah about the 4 children, the Arba Banim, in English?
Sure. The wicked one. What does he say? What is his service to you? He says to you, but not to him. By thus excluding himself from the community, he has denied the foundations of our faith. You, therefore, blunt his teeth and say to him, it is because of this that the Lord did for me when I left Egypt, for me, but not for him. If he had been there, he would not have been redeemed.
All right. Heard of it, right? All right. So what's sort of the central tension in this text? So firstly, what do we have? We have the Rasha, also known as the wicked child. And we have a message to those in charge of the community as to what they're supposed to do, right? Now, what's sort of the central tension here? The language is pretty inclusive of that central tension. Gives us a sense of the centrality of peoplehood.
This child doesn't think he's included, doesn't want to stoop to being part of it.
Okay, so it's possible the child here doesn't feel included or is not being included. What's the essential, right? So John and or Jean mentioned the tension between individual and a larger community, right? So the Rasha, what's sort of the Rasha bucking here? Sort of pushing back against the Seder, right? The Seder is the service here. The Seder brings to bear all the commandments, all of the rituals, all of the aspects that make Yetziat Mitzrayim, that is the Exodus from Egypt, important. And the Rasha is saying, who needs this? Right? Or why am I here? You know, it could be that the child doesn't see it as relevant, or nobody's really taught that relevance to the child. So it's not just the child who's being impetuous or wicked.
Who is saying if he if he had been there, he would not have been redeemed. Who is that?
Oh, this is the one. This is, the person who, if you feel this question, you're leading the Seder,
Right.
and some child says, I don't really care about this. Why is this important? What does this mean to you? Because it's not that important to me. You're the person kind of in charge, right? So it could be you at your own Seder table, or it could be somebody who's running the community.
Is the person in charge not trying to include him then by saying he would not have been redeemed? Like, is he not bringing them into the community?
Well, I think that's the consequence. I think they are, they're trying to sort of warn this child. You're going to exclude yourself from the community. You're going to be excluded, right?
Okay.
All right. So by pushing back, it's pushing against the community. What does it say about the community? The response to the Rasha is indeed harsh, John or Jean, for sure. It's a child here. It's a child. It's a child who's trying to find purpose in life. And in here, there's a real consequence if you don't sort of lock into the notion that you're part of a larger identity, part of a team. For sure, that is a bit of a harsh punishment for a kid.
But if you look at it, it says, Rasha says, what is this service to you, not for me? He's not saying me. And so they're saying, because you are excluding yourself, then you if you had been in Egypt, you would not be redeemed.
Yes, right. So he's not identifying with it personally. The Rasha is definitely redeemable, but it requires somebody receiving the Rasha with an understanding that, maybe the criticism is not that bad. How many of you ever found something in your Jewish practice that you don't find particularly relevant or essential to your Jewish identity?
The sacrificial cult.
All right. I mean, there's probably there's a lot of things that are problematic. There are things in Torah that we don't even celebrate, right? God forbid we should embrace the Torah as it relates to our LGBTQ community verbatim. We'd never be, an open community. And for somebody to say, well, you're very exclusive, and not only that, it's inhumane, what your text has to say. If we weren't willing to hear that criticism, we might not ever evolve. So I do think the Rasha is useful. By the way, I do think it's important sometimes to think of the 4 children, just as an aside, as a reflection of who we are as individuals. We have a little bit of all of them. There's a little rebelliousness in all of us. There's some wisdom in all of us. There's kind of a cluelessness in all of us about certain things. And there is sort of a naivete, and it's not quite there. We're not sure what to ask. Might even be somewhat apathetic. Not that we're bad people, right? Here, the Rasha gets a severe consequence, but I do think the Rasha has redeeming qualities. Also probably needs a better teacher to draw that child out. Because remember, why is the wise child so wise? Because he buys into everything, hook, line, and sinker. Well, he says us, all right, so he feels he's part of the team. But mostly it's because he shows literacy. Is literacy the only way to show wisdom?
Oh, but it's an important one.
Well, of course, it's important to be literate. With literacy comes competence. With confidence comes the ability to take the ideas off the shelf, if you will, and to bring them out into the world and to teach others. There's no doubt that each of these childs is valuable. Just when you kind of look at this language at first, it's jarring. But what do we take away in terms of the centrality of the community? You can write in the chat box. You can see if you want to raise your hand using the the hand raising function, then I can see everybody here in my participants list. I can see somebody raising their hand. I only see 6 of you at a time. So Jay.
Rabbi, if you use the little carrot-shaped thing at the top or bottom of your picture screen, you can scroll through us and see our pictures as you wish.
Well, no, I know that, but I cannot necessarily see somebody raising their hand in real time because I can't see everybody at once. So if you're the only ones in my screen, then I will see you. Raise your hand. If you are the 6 other people that are not my screen, then I will not see you. So we're learning here. All right. So what? Okay. Yes, that we are okay. That we're stronger together. That's important for us to be unified in our purpose. Right. So the centrality, right? Community is the bedrock. It's weakened by fractions. Mitzrayim experience must be a collective experience as our part of our collective consciousness, which is why the Rosh Hashanah is rebuked. Indeed. Right. That the collective, there's something about pulling together that is central to our Jewish identity. That's not to say that there's not a space for individuality. It's not that the individual is erased. It's all about group process, group think. But there is something redemptive about a collective identity. All right. Our faith defines our community. The foundation of our faith is community. Right. So here in the Passover Haggadah, we learn about the importance of community, its centrality in terms of having a collective identity. And this collective identity is at the root of our sovereignty. Right? There's no reason for a state of Israel if it doesn't flow out a sense of this national collective identity that exists whether the state is in place or not. But it's this national identity that then fuels the sovereignty and calls us to try and understand, A, what does it mean to be a sovereign nation when you live in Israel? And what does it mean to have a sovereign nation when you live outside of Israel? All right, and we'll talk more about that in the second half of class. All right, let's take another text together. All right, and let's take a look at this one. Tanya, will you read this piece on Ruth? It's at the end of this section. So we're just going to try and, it's right underneath the Passover text. Of course, we'll see this for Shavuot.
She said, "See, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and her gods. Go follow your sister-in-law." But Ruth replied, "Do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus and more may the Lord do to me, if anything but death parts me from you."
Okay, Chavrei. So Ruth is a text that we read. Devorah, I think I pronounced it correctly. Tanya, how do you pronounce your name, please?
It's Tanya. Yeah.
Is that what I thought? Did I say that?
Yeah, I think so.
Great. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Devorah. All righty. So we have, thank you, Cantor, right? So Naomi is Ruth's mother-in-law. Ophrah is the sister-in-law. And so Ruth we read during the holiday of Shavuot. And here we have Ruth, who is not born a Jew, but becomes part of the Jewish community. And this is a very important text as it relates to collective identity and the centrality of peoplehood. So what do we learn about peoplehood from Ruth? I think Naomi is wait, your sister-in-law's, yeah, Naomi is speaking to Ruth. Jay, do you have your hand up?
Not really, but my reply would be to say that she puts peoplehood first, that you and your group are the most important thing, and I will follow the rest of your routines after that.
Okay, so Ruth, very different than the Rasha, recognizes how important it is to kind of roll with her people. Wherever you go, I'm going. I'm with you.
But Ruth is the new Jew. She said, "See your sister-in-law." That's Naomi, and Ruth is talking back, saying, "I'm going to stay with you because this is what I chose."
True. So, but how does that work within the larger sense of peoplehood?
Interestingly, because she's a Moabite, which we're not supposed to deal with, and isn't she an ancestor of King David?
Yes.
So,
so the line of the Messiah is supposed to flow through that line.
right, and but it's a choice, and she made it. Some of us are born to it; others of us have chosen it.
Right. So the question is what draws you into this central notion of peoplehood? Your intentionality, your choice. Some of it is biological, via bloodlines, but really more importantly, it's by choice. As we see here in this chat, participation in the community is by choice. The Rasha differently distancing himself. But in my opinion, not irreconcilably. The Rasha is the type of person who needs somebody who can give that person space to spout off, Let's say, you know what, you're okay with me. I'm going to show you in ways that you couldn't dream and bring that person along. Ruth's easier to deal with because she's committed, she's cheerful, she's kind, she's loyal, she is all about unity, and she's motivated to make a choice. Okay. Any other questions so far, or any questions so far about the centrality of peoplehood? Everybody know how to raise their hand besides raising their real hand? All right. Okay. I also have the chat box open. I'm keeping an eye on it, so you can write something if you have a question. All right. So, okay. So now we're going to figure out why peoplehood's so important from a textual standpoint. All right. So let's start with Mishnah Pesachim, the more Passover-oriented stuff. Let's see. Devorah, please.
all right. Mishnah Pesachim 10:5.
Everybody there? Mishnah Pesachim 10:5, text 7.
Rabban Gamliel used to say, "Whoever does not make mention of these three things on Passover does not fulfill his obligation." And these are they?
Yeah.
The Passover offering, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs. The Passover offering, because the omnipresent passed over the houses of our ancestors in Egypt, as it is said, "Then you shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, for that he passed over." The unleavened bread, because our fathers were redeemed from Egypt, as it said, and they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they brought out of Egypt. The bitter herb, because the Egyptians embittered the lives of our fathers in Egypt, as it is said, and they made their lives bitter. In every generation, a person is bound to regard himself as though he personally had gone forth from Egypt, because it is said, "And you shall tell your child in that day, saying, It is because of that which the Lord did for me when I came forth out of Egypt.
All right. So first things first. Yes, after like the verb are, you have like you wouldn't put them there, you put they.
That's what I thought.
It's one of those strange grammatical things. All right. So what do we learn about the essential nature of peoplehood here?
We're supposed to experience this.
Yeah, well, there's a solidarity with those who have gone through it. We sort of recognize that our ancestors went through a series of experiences, right? Caused them to make a Passover offering, to eat unleavened bread, right? In gratitude for the redemption from Egypt, right? That their ancestors were embittered because of slavery. And so they, this is the essential narrative of the Exodus and what came of it, and what came of our people. And we, in solidarity, will be celebrating Passover soon, not in a historic sense, but in a personal sense, right? And you shall tell your child that day, V'higadata levincha, you shall tell your child, or your neighbor, your friend, online, of course, unless, or within your home with your immediate people there. But there's a sense that we tell this story as though we're living it in solidarity with those who lived it long ago. We're living it now. So the experience and significance of peoplehood is that it creates a common experience, a kinship. Yes, a shared experience. Kind of a re-experience every Passover. A sense that we're brought together by this narrative of peoplehood. It's far more than a narrative about ritual. It's far more than a historical narrative. It's far more than just, I love how my family gets together and has a meaningful Jewish experience, which is still very powerful. It is that somehow we are all part of this. Not only now, but always. The experience of peoplehood is something that has been there since the beginning. Well, check that for a second. It became clear in the Exodus from Egypt. And then it was sealed in a way at Sinai, where we stood collectively to receive the covenant. That's sort of where God enters into our history as a people. We start to identify as a people. Yes, indeed. So it's interesting. So Devorah, there's no doubt that Judaism in general and peoplehood gain great strength from our family engagement around the Seder table. The thing is that family is an extension of individual, and more or less, depending on who you are, connects with the larger people. Sometimes we do things what's good for our families because we feel good about that. I think what the conversation here is how much does that extend beyond ourselves as individuals and even our own families? Is there a broader community to which we are accountable as a Jewish people or as Jewish individuals, even as Jewish families? Is there something bigger than just us? Yes, we invite Elijah as well, which is a reflection of our hope for our redemption going forward and our fulfillment, maybe even going to Israel. Everyone was doing it at the same time around the world, right? So that definitely is something to consider as a reflection of how we engage as a people, that we're all in it together, doing it together. All right, let's
even
move.
Elijah,
Go ahead.
Even Elijah being ready to the Seder table is an important reflection of how we act as a people, because Elijah says, you know, sorry, buddy, I just woke up my husband taking a nap. Elijah says that, you know, there's not going to be any more Jewish children. I'm the only one who believes in God. He has that whole showdown with the priest of Baal. And he's forced into coming to see our Passover observance, and he's forced into being at a brit because it shows a continuation of the Jewish people as a collective, but he's not the only one.
Right. Excellent. Okay, everybody needs to mute. I'm going to mute everybody.
Sorry.
And then if you want to speak, then unmute. All right, I am muting everybody now. So if you want to speak, then unmute. That'll help. All right, thank you for that message. All right, so let's take a look at another text. Let's look at Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Sanhedrin 44a. That's text number 9. Cantor, will you read that for us? Israel has sinned.
Sure. Excuse me. Israel has sinned. Rabbi Avav and Zavda said, even though the people have sinned, they're still called Israel. Rabbi Abba said, these people say a myrtle, though it stands among reeds, is still a myrtle, and it is so called.
All right. What's the experience and significance of peoplehood in this context?
No matter how spread out we are in diaspora, we're still part of a collective.
Okay.
You know.
All right, that's good. So no matter where you live, you're part of the people. If you make a mistake, if you sin, are you disqualified? No, you might be culpable, right? I mean, somebody culpable for not loving one's neighbor, culpable for something worse, is not thrown out. That's right. Scott or Lynn, you still have me private. So Scott and Lynn said that even if you leave, you can come back. Yes, that is true. Even if you come back, even if you leave, you cannot run or hide from your heritage. You can go, but you can come back. Right. Once a myrtle, always a myrtle. Even if you stand among lots of reeds. It lends to what? Some continuity. It's one of the reasons why we haven't disappeared, is because, you know, in some shape, way, or form, we're always part of the people. So the question is, how does that work for converts? Well, you know, let me answer that in this way. You know, oftentimes when somebody finishes a conversion process, goes through Beit Din, the tribunal, and the mikvah, when they're done with that, we say, welcome home. Why do you think we say welcome home? All right. So I'm reading a bunch of the. All right. So let me catch this. So my nephew's grandfather was Jewish, was not accepted to birthright. So who decides if you're Jewish and part of the community? A point raised in Section 3 discussion about Israel as a nation and a refuge. Yeah, that is the politics of peoplehood can be exclusive, and depending on who's in charge, can determine how we look at that. And that is very problematic in terms of certain engagement, whether it's participating in birthright or even making aliyah, right? So it's certainly not perfect. But from my perspective, as a Reform rabbi, there's a notion that we're all at Sinai, even if we weren't born Jewish, right? It's sort of Ruth, right? I mean, Ruth made choices and felt very much part of our Jewish experience. And what's really powerful about Ruth is that through her, we will see the Messiah. So, right. Yeah, you're right. Politics. Gotta try and keep up with everybody here. All right. It'd be really good if we could find a way to like talk more to keep up with all these. Anyway, so let me just read these out for everybody. Let's see. Politics should not be determining peoplehood. It's true. Theoretically, it's true. In practice, there are those who decide, and that's unfortunate. I'm guessing that the child's mother was not Jewish. It's a problem in the sense that not that the child's mother was not Jewish, but that some of us determine descent lines through the patrilineal descent, which has historic merit, by the way. It was always patrilineal descent until it wasn't. It became matrilineal descent for despicable reasons. And then was sort of embraced and co-opted by the Jewish community as the way until Reform Judaism came along and said, no, through the mother, through the father, either way, legitimately Jewish. And of course, to John and or Jean's point, disengagement between Israel and diaspora has a lot to do with how we define who is Jewish. So, all right, let's see. Okay. All right, let's take a few minutes break, and then we're going to come back and do a little bit of practicing with breakout rooms. I want to do a little practice. If you don't want to be in a breakout room, you don't have to be, but I want to see if we can do that. I think will help foster more discussion between people, which is something I value. So we'll try to figure out. If you really don't want to be part of that, you can opt out. You'll let me know, but I want to experiment even for a few minutes, okay? While I have everybody. So why don't we take, a 3 to 5 minute break, and I'll see you then. So it's 1:41. Come back at like 1:45. All right? Right. All right. I'm going to try to do something here. See what happens. What are they going to make me do here? Oh, okay, here we go. All right. I'm going to open up the breakout rooms, and we're just going to see what happens when I do, okay? All right, here we go. Let's see what happens. Go ahead and Adele, do you see the invitation I sent you? Should be something that says join breakout room. All right. All right. All right. Let us, I want to unmute everybody. Okay. How was that?
It worked great.
All right.
Had fun.
So good. Did not work for anybody. Was anybody like thrown out? I noticed I had to readmit some people.
I was thrown out.
What happened?
I don't know. Who knows?
Interesting, but you're back in. All right.
I'm back in.
Well, remember to We have to unmute the microphones when you go into the chat rooms. So you have to
Oh.
remember to do that.
Yes.
And
Okay.
it's asking you if you want to leave. So if by any chance you click leave, that kicks you out.
Got it. All right. So I have to unmute. Very good. Learning how to like teach and be the tech captain at once. Ideally, we'll have a tech captain in the future, somebody who's just in charge of captaining us through. So the thought is that I would send each of the groups into a chat room to like take one of those texts and kind of take a microscope to it in a smaller group. It facilitates nice conversation that's hard for us to do as a group, right? So if you like that idea, I'm going to do that. If you don't like that idea, we'll keep you out of the chat room and I don't know, we'll talk together. And we'll go with it in a moment. We'll get back to another text. So one thing I did want to share with you. Oh, by the way, I answered some of your questions. What's the despicable reason why we went to matrilineal descent? Rape of Jewish women, sadly, by Roman and Assyrian soldiers. And it's devastating, but that's sort of how it came about. And it has always been patrilineal from the time of Abraham on, right? But for whatever reason, we abandoned that because of this high incidence of terror among Jewish women. So I feel like we need to mute everybody. Is everybody muted? Okay. And then the other question, hang on. Oh, the connection between matrilineal descent and Kohanim. Definitely, Kohanim is in the bloodline through the father. So it's an inconsistency. One thing I don't want you to think about Judaism or Jewish peoplehood is that it's monolithic. There are a lot of ways to make Judaism matter, and there are a lot of ways even within certain sects of Jewish engagement, whether it's a Reform Jew or a Satmar or a secular, we have ways of finding our own legitimacy. The power of peoplehood, of course, and the essence of lesson 3 really is, can we transcend these lines of demarcation in such a way that we get behind the power of sovereignty that gives us freedom, actually, just to say, hey, you know what? We're family because we're Jewish, or we identify with the Jewish community in some shape, way, or form, right? So you're born in or you convert in, whether you're secular, you're religious, Reform, Orthodox, or none of the above, whether you're atheist or a true believer, you're all part of the family. Sovereignty is sort of the umbrella under which we can all coexist. Question or comment? There are Cohens who are doing blood work, or doing blood tests and finding links. Yeah. Interesting. I like the idea of chat rooms, and you said not in Torah, Scott, Lynn. Chat rooms in the Torah, or not in Torah, it's something else. I don't quite know what that means. All right. All right, let's share my screen. All right, so just some review here from the video with Rabbi Hartman and Tal Becker, Yehuda Kurtzer, Gil Troy. What is sovereignty and how does it enrich Jewish life? Sovereignty is collective identity transformed into nationhood. And Israel is today's central expression of that. Israel is the aspiration that we see at the end of the Haggadah, at the end of the Haggadah, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. It's not only an aspiration, it's true. And so Rabbi Hartman goes into a number of ways in which he tries to define sovereignty. What does sovereignty mean? The first two things he talks about aren't necessarily definitions of sovereignty, but more about what sovereignty ought to be, right? So sovereignty should be a function of one's rights to have sovereign status, one that we need not rationalize or legitimize to anyone. And sovereignty defined is essentially a fulfillment of national identity. And then he goes on to talk about how our actual sovereign existence has to be both interesting and meaningful. Let's see here. Not in Torah. That's well, right. So we're going to get to sort of what is sort of essential about sovereignty in Israel. So I've outlined it here, the key features that contribute to Israel's gift to contemporary Jewish identity, and more broadly, the idea of sovereignty. So firstly, Israel has to be able to exercise power and utilize its resources for national protection. Sort of the collective, I am there for you. Secondly, sovereignty means that Jews have a home that's actually connected to the earth, rooted in the land. There are particular confines. We have the friendly confines here in Chicago that we might be able to visit someday long off into the future. But Israel is a certain confine, not always as friendly as we'd like it to be outside of Israel and sometimes inside of Israel, but confines of a particular place mark one's rootedness and give people safety, not only to survive, but to be their individual selves and their Jewish selves. Thirdly, sovereignty has to be based on a creation of a place that does more than protect or welcome or create Jewish living space, but creates a context for Judaism to thrive. In other words, he talks about bringing Jewish ideas off the bookshelf and applying them in society, in the Jewish marketplace, in Jewish society. So that means that we go from being moral critics about the world to being exemplars of that morality. And this fuels how we look at certain decisions. In Israel, they talk about how they're going to treat the poor and create policy to help the poor. How are they going to reach out to those who are elderly? How are we going to take care of our elderly? This becomes policy. It's Jewish policy based on Jewish ideas. What does it mean to be a Jewish army? IDF identifies and lives by certain Jewish codes. That becomes, they become agents in pushing the Jewish mission forward, even as soldiers. And then finally, D, sovereignty is based on the creation of an identity that's independent of what you believe and do Jewishly. This is where the experiment is faulty, right? Somebody identifies as a Jew, wants to make Aliyah, and they're going to see barriers because somebody doesn't think that they're Jewish enough, right? But ideally, and the conversation that Hartman is calling us to have, not only with one another, but with all Jews anywhere, including in Israel, is how do we get past these points of demarcation? How do we develop a certain independence from these points of separation? How do we transcend these barriers so that we can look at each other and say, we are part of a people? Whether you're a Satmar, whether you've converted in, whether you're an atheist, whether you're liberal or conservative, we're all part of the same people. he emphasizes the experimental nature of this sovereignty, which means it's going to have strengths and it's going to have weaknesses. So what I want to do is put you in a chat room to discuss these questions here. In fact, I wonder if I can put them in the chat box. Let us just take these 2 questions here. Put them in the chat box. They go in? Oh, bummer. I know what I need to do. Hang on. Let's see here. I need to my, there we go. No, that's not it. I can't seem, all right, let me just put these in. What does homeland mean to you? Can we learn sovereignty, Israel, without living there? All right, those are the 2 questions I want you to think about. I'm going to put you now into sharing groups, all right? Take about 3 or 4 minutes or 5 minutes to discuss that, all right? And then we'll come back. All right, so breakout rooms. Perfect. Here we go. All right. All right, unmute all. Okay. All right. Hi, Adrian.
Hi.
How are you?
Oh, I'm great. Holding up just great. Thank you.
Okay,
How are you?
good. Pardon the sort of the just trying to move everybody forward here, and have you thought about this question? What does it homeland mean to you?
What is upsetting to me is so many people, so many Jewish people who have taken such an adverse attitude toward Israel upsets me terribly. It's like they turned against Israel, and I wonder, and I hear it constantly, and instead of supporting what they're up against, their neighbors, their missiles, the fact that if there was states, they'd probably be bombed off the earth the second that they had the state. They'd be too close, and it would be not safe for Israel. And I'm upset that so many Jewish people have stopped their support of Israel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't see where they fit into the sovereignty of Judaism and Israel, because it's like they've turned their back on Israel.
Yeah, well, that's a big issue, as is those who feel they possess a sovereignty and don't have to listen to anyone else about Israel, right? So you have those who turn their backs, in a sense, outside of Israel, and there's those inside, but there are those who turn their backs on the Jewish people, you know, and don't, you know, not open to, you know, what's going to take for us all to somehow find ourselves being part of the same experience, part of the same sovereign nation. So it's an interesting question ultimately is, if you don't live in Israel, how do you make the sovereignty of Israel meaningful? Right? So you're not there necessarily voting, you're not there defending the country, you're not necessarily making policy that brings the Judaism off the shelf and into life, right? How do you make that sovereignty meaningful living here in Chicago?
Well, it's just like people who decide on the borders of, say, like Arizona and California. You don't live there, so you don't know what the people who live there are experiencing. And I don't know why people up north are making this decision when they don't know the first thing about what's going on there. And it's like, I don't know in Israel what my people I know in Israel are. I'm not corresponding with them all the time. So I don't know what their problems are. I have to trust that they know what they're doing.
Well,
And
sure.
I back them. And I'm behind them and for them. I'm for the best for Israel. And I'm hoping the people who live there vote for the best for Israel.
So one of the ways in which we live out our lives in connection with Israel's sovereignty is to recognize its sovereignty to make decisions for its own good, for its own welfare. The challenge becomes, and I wonder what you think about this, is when Israel decides who's in and who's out in terms of the Jewish community. Is there a point where we say, hey, you know what? The sovereignty belongs not just to those who are voting and defending, but also to those who are part of a Jewish people. I mean, our texts are trying to give us a sense that we are part of a larger people, and that for the sovereignty to work, somehow we all have to relate to it as a people, whether you live in Israel or you live in Chicago or somewhere else. So I wonder, and this is always a challenge, right? If you're not voting there, you're not defending the country, you're not living with the existential worry of whether your child's going to make it out of the army alive. These are real issues, scary issues that are in place to protect Israel's sovereignty. And we may feel reluctant to speak out. At the same time, I wonder if part of the sovereignty, living with the sovereignty outside of our nation, is to be appropriately critical.
Well,
it's a question, it's not a sermon. It's a question. You could say yes, no, maybe, I don't know.
It's just very difficult. It depends on what the issue is.
I guess so.
But something that's very grassroots, how could I make a decision when I don't know what they're feeling and experiencing with this issue? Something like Jewish people, Reformed Jews being ostracized and treated badly, that's something I can vote, I can express an opinion.
I see. That's fine. Right. So some things you can, some things you don't, because you don't know enough. And that might be true about any setting, even here in America.
Yeah.
You know, where you have a right to speak your mind and to vote and to act according to conscience, and you know, you're completely free to do that. Doesn't mean you're going to do it in every situation. Mm-hmm. I do think that one of the things that we're doing that I think reflects our appreciation of Israel's sovereignty is we're learning more about it. We're having conversations that maybe we not had before. And by virtue,
all Jewish people.
Well, yeah, but I mean, in this particular exercise, we are learning more about our relationship with Israel than maybe we knew, you know, a month ago or 2 months ago. We're trying to engage and move forward and develop a greater sense of what is Israel? What does it mean? What does it mean to us? What responsibilities do we have going forward to create a meaningful relationship, to improve on a meaningful relationship, and so on. All right, I'm going to let these folks know that we're going to get back to come back in 57 seconds. What does homeland mean to you?
The word homeland?
Yeah.
It's very emotional. It's like all the Christians have 98% of the world, and we have this little 2% for Jewish homeland. I think it's very important.
Yeah. I agree. I agree.
Do we lose a lot of people?
No, they haven't come back yet.
How many rooms did you have, Rabbi?
They have 20 seconds.
No, how
4.
many rooms?
We have,
4?
well, technically 5 because Adrian and I had a chat. But
But
4
Jay and I are the only ones in ours.
4 official. Yeah,
Well-
because you came out early. I don't know why. I guess you can leave earlier.
No, it told us.
Oh, really? That's weird.
It
It
told
said
us.
the chat room will close in 58, 57, 56 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, everybody has the same amount. Open all rooms. Close all rooms. There we go.
Oh, I got kicked out.
Sorry. Let me. And it got kicked out totally. No, I see everybody back.
No.
Where's Rich?
Rich is right here.
Maya and Tanya and I didn't get far enough in our conversation. So when she said,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. How much time would you have preferred? You can tell me honest. Do you have 3 or 4 more minutes? 10 more minutes?
I think it would be beneficial in part because we're really getting kind of to know each other a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah, that was
Right.
So the breakout feature, now that we practice, this was more of a practice than a real breakout. I mean, I'd like to give you, good 10, 15 minutes to discuss a text or a question, create a little more intimacy, a little more, personal control over the environment here, a little more sharing and getting to know one another. I think that's important. So got about 15 minutes left, and I thought we would spend a little bit of time reflecting on some of the highlights of your conversations. And it would be great if we could keep the mics. Well, no, actually, if you could mute yourself, unless you're talking, we'll go in each group and you give me the highlights. And then the last, say, 5 minutes, we'll pick up a text or two before we leave. And then, of course, we'll always cover the last part of the text from the previous lesson at the beginning of the next lesson. So we can do a little review, and then we'll get back into the regular lesson, whatever the new lesson. So next time will be lesson 4. Understand? All right. So group 1 was Adele, Andrew, and Cantor. What do you know? Did we lose Cantor? No, there she is.
We lost Adele though, and I'm so sorry, Adele. I don't know what happened.
Well, I see her here.
I know, but you can't hear her and you can't see her. We started out seeing her, but we couldn't hear her. We were having a little technical difficulties. Yeah, I'm gonna deputize Andrew.
Like, thanks a lot.
Where did Andrew left the building? Oh, there he is.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, so we talked about most of the time we spend on the first question, this would be the homeland. And, we talked about the fact that, even if you're not there, knowing that it's there, kind of like almost as a place of refuge, the idea that knowing that it's an option, if someday there would be a need, if we felt unsafe here in America, that knowing that it's a place that, it's a community that we still have, I think is something that's kind of reassuring to us. We talk about that.
Good. By the way, Adele is muted and her screen is off.
Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, you did a beautiful job.
So knowing that Israel's there is like a night light in the night, somehow comforting and inspiring as a place of refuge. Nice. Okay. Let's see who is in. Oh, hang on. Group 2, Devorah, Jay.
I designate Jay.
We talked about Israel being a larger canvas upon which to paint our individual Jewish experiences and achievements. It's a broader place for us to do what it is that we can do best without the tremendous constraints of the relatively alien population around us.
Okay. This is a place to create a sovereign national Jewish experience in a hostile environment. It's not just about self-protection, although that's kind of the number one thing on the list at the end of the day. It's also a place to create meaningful Jewish engagement. Not just peoplehood, but engagement, Jewish engagement, make Jewish decisions. Nice. All right. Rich Lynn Scott. Who's talking?
We'll all talk. I can lead us off with a couple of things, if that's okay, Scott and Lynn. They
Sounds
are
good.
okay. The concept of foreign policy and who do you know, and now suddenly there's a nation, so you don't have to engage in a who do you know foreign policy to protect you, but you actually have a nation state. Scott brought up an interesting point that we all heard on that video about the importance of the state because of the quote unquote Jewish problem. And we were intrigued that maybe this is how it was talked about at the time, and maybe we could bring that out to the bigger group. Also, the lofty aspirational concept of this unification, this togetherness, which is aspirational at best, because the Haredi are running the country, and there seem to be high walls and a lot of separation, a lot of tension.
Yeah, that's why the law of return feels sometimes more aspirational and experimental, than inclusive. I think we can pinpoint it. I mean, look, it takes a whole people ultimately to move these things forward. But, I do think that some of us are more responsible than others in certain ways.
Sure. And in the interest of good teamwork, maybe I turn it over to my partners to finish up our discussion.
Sure. The one thing which, to go a little further on the right of return, I've never looked into it or looked at it, but I always thought it was for Jews who wanted to live in Israel. In the video, though, he was very clear that it was more than that. It was anyone persecuted as if they were Jewish. So
right.
That's something I had never heard, and I wanted maybe Rabbi to comment on really where it is at today.
Well, so I've had the same response. I am trying to figure out what that really means.
A Zoom session.
I'm trying to find out what that really means. It's a very good question. Let's pick it up next time. We'll put it in the parking lot now. I was surprised to hear that. I myself think about the law of return, albeit in some ways overly exclusive or needlessly exclusive, and why I'd like it to be open to such individuals. And apparently Rabbi Hartman said it is, in fact, open to such individuals. This was surprising to me nonetheless. So let's try and unpack that a little more fully, and we'll address it next time. Okay? But I like the question and I like the quandary. Anything else? Scott or Lynn? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Last group, Jean, Maya, Tanya. Who's first?
Well, I will very quickly go, but I think Maya has such a good global perspective that I want to make sure she has time to speak about it. And this was more just us talking, not necessarily a reflection on the text, but, I talked about sort of generationally, in some ways, I think there's some tension that my generation feels with Israel as a homeland because of the politics. And I talked about how my husband and I moved to Chicago 20 years ago when we were starting our adult lives together. And I think we really look at Chicago as our Jewish home, you know, and this is sort of, we feel very grounded here in Judaism, and have not had the privilege of traveling to Israel yet, which I'm sure will shape, you know, will give us a new perspective. We were hoping the year of our middle son's B'nai Mitzvah that we would be able to travel that year, but we'll see.
So homeland is wherever you decide it is.
Right.
That's not just my opinion, but Shalom Hartman is emphatic about that. And you know, the larger question really, and the question that they push forward is, how do we make sense of Jewish sovereignty in a Jewish homeland when you're living in Chicago?
Right. That's
whether you feel like you need to live there or not will always be a personal choice.
Right.
You know,
Maya,
Maya, you want to add?
Yeah, just my perspective is different because I grew up in Eastern Europe. I grew up in Romania, and I made Aliyah in Israel, and I lived there for 5 years. And despite all the hardship, I still believe and I still love Israel, and I still feel it's homeland for me.
Good. You know, look, and it can, by the way, it can be a homeland even if Chicago's a homeland.
Right. Which it is, yeah.
You could have two homelands. Yeah. Thank you. Jean.
I told Maya and John and I've been talking previously about this whole concept of sovereignty and nation state. You know, people still speak so much of the importance of Israel as a safe house for Jews. Jews who survived throughout history despite the rise and fall of different nations and empires. And who isn't to say that that is in fact a stronger model for success or for continuing to survive than the nation state. And if we keep, again, it comes back to the beginning of the course, if we keep thinking primarily as racial as Israel, thank goodness we've got Israel as a safe house, how do we ever move to what Jay described, which is using Israel as a canvas on which to illustrate or build a life based on values?
Well, right. So I guess if there's any good news is that these questions are all part of the larger conversation. Have to talk about Israel's safety, but it's not so dominant a conversation or a reality that we can't talk about creating that Jewish canvas. They have to be talked about in the same conversation, or at least the same broader conversation. All right, let's pause there for a second. I want to bring up one last text before I send you out. We're going to look at Gabby Eskenazi's text here. So let me see if I can find that. One sec. Let me minimize that. Pull this up. All right, back to you. Share text. There we go. All righty. Let's see. Jean, could you read this text from Chief of Staff Gabby Ashkenazi speech at Auschwitz in 2008?
Yeah, I'm going to dispense with the greetings.
That's fine, no problem.
Distinguished guests and friends from around the world, I am honored to be here today to share this significant experience with you. I will begin in Hebrew and will say a few words in English later on in my address. Here on this cursed land, saturated with the blood of our brothers and sisters, descendants of the Jewish nation, here in the Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp, the most evil place on the face of the planet, where our people, whose only crime was being Jewish, were tortured and murdered in gas chambers and crematoria. Here, in the place where the Nazi oppressor reduced our humanity to serial numbers. No more names, no more faces, no identity. All that remained was a number branded on the forearm. Here, in this most dreadful place, I stand on Holocaust Martyrs and Heroes Remembrance Day as the commander of the Israel Defense Forces. With hundreds of witnesses in uniform by my side, joining the thousands of representatives of the IDF who come here every year, commanders of the ground force, the Air Force, and the Navy, the defending force of the Jewish people reborn in its land, with tight lips, a hoarse voice, and tears in my eyes, yet still standing tall, I salute to the ashes of our people and vow never again. We, soldiers of the IDF, emissaries of a country and of a nation, stand here today wearing the IDF uniform and carrying the flag of the State of Israel with pride in the name of the tens of thousands of the IDF warriors and commanders. We consider ourselves the executor of the last will and testament, the dream and the silent prayer of our 6 million Jewish brothers and sisters whose existence was brutally expunged by the Nazi oppressor. 63 years have passed since the end of the most horrible war humankind has ever known. 63 years after the atrocity. The Star of David is no longer a mark of disgrace, but a symbol and a sign of the resurrection of the Jewish people. As the commander of the Israel Defense Forces, the fighting force of the mighty Jewish state, I stand here with pride and honor and pledge. Never again shall we stand helpless, crying for the mercy of others. Never again shall we beg to be defended. Never again shall we allow our sons and daughters, our parents and our grandparents to be erased from the face of the earth. Never again shall the frightened eyes of Jewish children look with ghastly dread through the barbed wire fences of concentration camps. Never. I stand here today in this heartbreaking spot as the commander of the army of the Jewish nation. In the name of the Israel Defense Forces, I salute the 6 million Jews who were annihilated by the Nazis and their collaborators. I vow to uphold the responsibility of the Israel Defense Forces, never again to allow Jewish blood to be spilled in vain. May the memory of those who perished in the Holocaust be forever blessed and remembered.
So the context of this beautiful speech and haunting speech is Auschwitz-Birkenau. The speaker is an IDF soldier, and the key focus here is in creating a protection for any Jew who might be subject to such terror. And it certainly lends to the significance of Israel's sovereignty as being a place that provides refuge and defends that refuge. But I think more importantly and more broadly, what this teaching indicates is that Israel has our collective back. So the larger question is, what do we as a people do, not only to have Israel, the sovereign nation's collective back, but the Jewish people's collective back? We have an important mitzvah, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Bazeh, and all of us are responsible for all of us. We each have responsibility to have each other's backs. And so on some levels, that is a military question, but not only. It is a Jewish peoplehood question. It is a Jewish practice question. It is a Jewish literacy question. It is a non-denominational question. It is a question that sort of belongs to all of us in one way or another. And it's really important for us, as we've said, to kind of step out of the death narrative, to step out of the refuge narrative, as though they're the only narratives. If you were only to read Ashkenazi's piece, you might think, wow, it just sort of reflects the death narrative and the trauma narrative. And that's all that Israel's sovereignty needs to be. It's all about refuge and protection and defense and no blood spilled in vain. and never again. And clearly the Shoah narrative is a powerful narrative and is central to our identity, our collective identity, and we should never forget. And yet, we have so much more that we have to cultivate if we're going to be sovereign. Whether we live in the land of Israel, rooted to the earth there, or we live here in Chicago or anywhere, trying to figure out what it's like to be, or what it means to be part of a people, and why that's significant to us. So that's why I'm so glad that you're here, and that we can continue to grow together in this conversation as we figure out, well, what does it mean to be part of a people and connected to the sovereign nation of Israel. So with that, I wish you all well. We can stop now if you need to run. Zis and Pesach to one and all. Jay will be in touch with everybody. He and I will be in touch with everybody.
Rabbi?
To pin down our dates, but we'll
Can
always, yeah.
I'd like to propose that we do every other week, as Jay outlined in his last email.
Yeah.
And make it at 1 o'clock so that we can have this as a steady thing and people know where it is and when it is.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And if you have ideas about formats, about maybe improving your experience, I am completely open. Do not hesitate. Whatever you need from this experience, I want to deliver. So you need to tell me, because I don't necessarily know. We will definitely try to improve our technological prowess, and I might try to recruit somebody to be my tech captain, because it's hard to manage everybody and teach you at the same time. So hope that didn't get in anybody's way. If it did, I perfectly understand. So
are we going to do 3 next time, or are we going to just go on to 4?
Okay, so let me, I might be repeating myself here, but the way I see this unfolding organically is that we didn't cover most of the text in chapter 3.
I'd like to finish.
So much like, hang on, let me finish. So much like we did today, where we covered text in chapter 2, because I thought we should, and it was a nice focus on Passover anyway, which is timely. We got 2 done for the most part. And, you know, we started on 3, you know, and I'm always going to try and, if you didn't see the video, I'm going to try to bring in some stuff that you might want to know about. If you didn't see the video, it'll help us level the playing field in terms of awareness of what's happening. And then we'll do breakouts where you have a chance to share, study text, talk about questions, answer them, reflect, etc. And then we'll study more text. So next time we'll study the text, most of the text in 3, do a breakout session probably, and then we'll talk about 4 and do the same. And it'll be fairly routine in terms of our structure, so you get used to it, okay? Good?
Yes.
Any other comments or concerns, questions, critiques? You can do it offline.
So video is number 4, though?
Number 4,
yeah,
right.
I misspoke. Be prepared. I was going to say let's watch 4, but I still think we could spend some time on 3 as Rabbi is outlining.
Yeah, but what I would do is look at 4. Hey, Finley. Look at the video from 4. And if you haven't looked at 3, look at that one too. They're not very long, less than an hour.
Yeah.
And you watch them in 2 sittings. You watch Rabbi Hartman's speech, which kind of sets the table, and then he interviews people. And those interviews are quite interesting, I find.
Yeah.
But you have to start over from the beginning. You can't pause it and come back.
That's true. Although you can move it ahead.
Yes.
So you don't have to watch it over and over again, like Groundhog Day.
No, that's true.
All right, friends.
Hour and a half each time?
An hour and a half, yeah.
Bye-bye.
Sorry we went over a little today. I will try to finish promptly in an hour and a half. Okay?
Okay.
Zis and Pesach. Thank you so much, everybody. Blessings.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Adrian. Take good care.
Next time I'm willing to go to a breakout session.
Oh, okay. You missed
Okay.
out on the fun, but see, we did okay.
Okay.
And by the way, you were very articulate.
Oh, well, thank you.
Look, the breakout sessions will only be based on material that we're covering.
Okay.
It's not going to be some random stuff.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Be
Be
well.
well.
Be
Be
well.
well.
Happy Passover. Bye
You
now.
too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye.